You asked for it, and here it is. Analog horror was, without a doubt, a revolution on the internet. A new way of telling horror stories that dives deep into the unsettling, the unknown, the sinister. It explores the gaps, the spaces between what's said and what's shown, the dark corners of the narrative. It's a genre that left a permanent mark on millions, and among all the analog horror series that have emerged since the very birth of the genre, only a handful have managed to carve themselves into the minds of viewers, permanently. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into one of those rare few, the Monument Mythos. So, did you miss me? Because I definitely missed you. As some of you might have seen in the community tab, I've been absolutely swamped with work these past few weeks, which really slowed down video production. But don't worry, things are finally back to normal. So I hope you're ready for the new weekly content coming your way. Alright, the Monument Mythos. You have no idea how long this video took to make. I'd say it's right up there with my ultimate breakdown of the Walton Files, and this one only covers Season 1, which is actually the easiest season to analyze in depth. So, if you want me to tackle the rest of the series, make sure to support this video as much as you can. Let's make a deal. I've never done this before, but here it is. If this video hits 4,000 likes, I'll immediately start working on the next season. It's all in your hands. With that said, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who responded to the pinned comment in the last video and for the incredible support you always give me. Remember, if you'd like to be featured in the next video, make sure to reply to the pinned comment where you'll find this question. What's the next OG analog horror series you'd like me to cover on the channel? Without further ado, don't forget to subscribe to help the channel grow and reach more people. Remember, every like is one more coin to escape poverty. If you're unsure what to comment, just type meow in the comments section and I'll give you a heart in return. Comments are incredibly important and help the video a lot, so don't forget to leave yours. And of course, check out my second channel too, created by Manticore. Welcome to the Monument Mythos Ultimate Breakdown. The story begins with a message on screen placing us in 2011. Riley Tillon, an apparently ordinary man, starts uploading videos online, describing a strange, invisible presence in his home. 3 videos were posted that year, until a 4th one, released in 2013, sparked serious concerns about his mental state and triggered an in-depth investigation by the authorities. But this presence Riley talks about isn't a ghost. It's not even a physical intruder. What he's experiencing are dimensional anomalies, not hallucinations, real creatures that can only exist between planes of existence in the fragile seams of what we understand as space. In the first video, dated October 20th, 2011, Riley introduces his theory. Multiple dimensions exist simultaneously, each one a separate plane, some of them even 2-dimensional. When 2 or more planes intersect, they form what he calls an intersection point, a corner, an angle, a vertex. And it's in those corners where the impossible happens. According to Riley, these points of intersection function as natural portals between different planes. For the beings of one plane, the others are completely imperceptible. Each exists in isolation from the rest. However, there is one exception, the CORNERFOLK. Through his research, Riley claims that the CORNERFOLK are trans-dimensional entities capable of moving between planes by passing through these geometric intersections. To us, a corner is just a corner, but to them, it's a door between realities. They are the only known creatures that can travel from one dimension to another by slipping through the angular structures of our world. Riley believes he has seen them inside his own home. He says the corners of his house are aligned with several dimensional intersections and that he's witnessed these beings crossing planes right there in his living room. In other words, his home is a passage point between worlds, and he's trapped in the middle of it. In the footage he shares, Riley documents that every time a CORNERFOLK entity moves through a corner, a flash of blue light occurs, a burst of energy so intense it briefly illuminates the room, a phenomenon that, according to him, would require a massive amount of power to generate. In the second video, released a week later, Riley discovers that while he's away from home, up to 12 CORNERFOLK gather calmly in a doorway. Contrary to what he first believed, these creatures don't seem to be in constant motion. In fact, they appear to rest and shift gently in place, almost like animals in a state of hibernation. This discovery leads Riley to a disturbing new theory. The behavior of the CORNERFOLK suggests that they come from a world of their own, an environment he calls the corner world, an alternate plane made entirely of intersections where these creatures exist freely, without boundaries. Riley also notices that the skin of the smaller CORNERFOLK is marked with bizarre geometric patterns, as if their bodies had been pressed against multiple planes at once. He starts to believe that the corners in his home might actually be the equivalent of a nursery in the corner world. By the third video, dated December 16th, 2011, Riley has completely lost control of his life. He's no longer working, he doesn't leave the house, he spends his days drawing and writing about the corner world. He's become obsessed. He claims he's started dreaming about that place, and he's convinced his body could physically cross over. He believes the CORNERFOLK are mocking him, taunting him with every dimensional jump, challenging him, inviting him to follow them. And even though he knows crossing over could destroy his body, maybe even kill him, he no longer cares. He's made up his mind. Fear of destruction won't stop him, and so he crosses. What we see is a strange black and white distortion, like a woven net of interdimensional fibers. It's almost impossible to describe. This is the corner world. After this video, viewers became deeply concerned for his safety. Eventually, the authorities visited his home. They found him curled up in the corner of his room, unconscious, his internal organs folded along multiple axes, a terrifying description that suggests Riley's body had literally been bent, as if made of paper, trying to conform to a geometry it was never meant to endure. During his recovery, Riley begins making origami obsessively, despite claiming he never learned how to do it. For those unfamiliar, origami is the Japanese art of paper folding. It involves creating shapes, animals, flowers, objects, or figures, using nothing but folds. This new compulsion might be a residual imprint left by the corner world. Having been folded internally, Riley's mind could now be externalizing that pattern through instinctive behavior. In 2020, Riley remains under the care of his friends. It's still unclear whether he fully came back from the corner world, or if only part of him ever did. While CORNERFOLK may seem like a self-contained story, it actually introduces key concepts that will echo throughout the rest of the series. The existence of layered realities, natural structures acting as portals, the use of energy to cross planes, and entities that don't obey any kind of human logic. This is only the beginning. Let's move on to the next episode. The Statue of Liberty, inaugurated in 1886, was a gift from France to the United States. Its original name was Liberty Enlightening the World, and its message was clear. It stood for freedom, democracy, and hope. Standing at the entrance to New York Harbor, the statue was, and still is, the very first symbol millions of immigrants saw upon arriving in America, offering a silent promise of a new life. It became an icon of the nation's founding ideals: justice, liberty, and opportunity. But in the universe of the Monument Mythos, the truth buried beneath this monument is deeply disturbing. The episode opens with a peculiar note in the video's description, a warning meant to frame what we're about to witness. It explains that the audio we'll hear is supposedly a fragment from an 1889 interview with Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi, the original designer of the Statue of Liberty. However, it also states that all surviving recordings of this interview are believed to be fakes, produced by American publicists at the turn of the 20th century. But why would they forge an interview? The answer remains unclear, for now. The message ends by revealing that this episode includes a fully restored clip from the classified document known as the Statue of Liberty 1.8084, now free of visible damage. In the interview, Bartholdi describes the most difficult part of the construction not as the statue itself, but the pedestal. What initially seems like a minor architectural detail slowly reveals something much more sinister. For 4 entire years, U.S. President Ulysses Grant demanded constant changes to the pedestal's dimensions, ordering it to be resized again and again based on unexplained, shifting criteria. Eventually, the pedestal ended up being taller than the statue itself. Why? Because it was essential for what they were really trying to achieve. Decades later, in 1949, the statue underwent an extensive renovation process, and it's here that we catch our first glimpse of the real horror. A classified blueprint is revealed, the classified document mentioned earlier in the video description. It had remained hidden for 36 years. Its purpose was chilling. Provide entrance for sustenance. Install engine to assist with eventual departure. The engine was to be installed in the pedestal's base, along with an entry system leading into a chamber, outfitted with a waste drainage unit and a storage tank. Combined with the massive scale of the pedestal, this leads to one terrifying conclusion. The structure was built as a container, a vessel meant to house something alive, something that clearly needed to be fed, and something that, based on the text and the added detail of wheels installed at the statue's base, as if it wasn't a permanent structure, but a capsule designed to move and open, was never meant to stay sealed forever. In this alternate universe, the Statue of Liberty isn't a monument, it's a prison. A containment unit designed to one day release something monstrous. Next, the episode takes us to the summer of 1954, where we hear a first-hand testimony from Eleonora Bramante, an Italian immigrant newly arrived at Ellis Island. Her account shatters any romantic notion of the American migration story. She describes the place as reeking of rotten meat, like a slaughterhouse. Families tried masking the stench with perfumes and candles, but the smell always returned. Dead birds lay scattered across the grounds. Everything felt lifeless, rotten. And then comes the most disturbing part. Every night, from her window, Eleonora says she watched U.S. officials escort groups of people in single file toward the Statue of Liberty. They'd enter the pedestal, and then nothing. By morning, the smell was even worse. The implication is crystal clear. Those people were being sacrificed, devoured, consumed by whatever was hidden inside the pedestal. The Ellis Island immigration station closed later that same year, in November. The story then jumps forward in time to August 1985, the moment of the first recorded sighting of the creature known as the LIBERTYLURKER. It's the being that's been lurking beneath the Statue of Liberty all along. We're not told exactly what it is, but the footage at the end of the episode leaves little room for doubt. Here it is. The camera captures the statue shifting slightly to one side, confirming the presence of wheels beneath it. Then, from the base of the pedestal, a massive, twisted shape begins to emerge, dark, horned. A colossal creature has been hiding there the entire time. The video abruptly cuts out, and the episode ends with 2 final, devastating revelations. First, when authorities finally accessed the hidden chamber beneath the statue, they discovered so many human remains that they officially classified it as a mass grave. The most iconic monument in American history is, in this reality, literally a tomb. And second, a message, cold and bureaucratic, that's even more horrifying in its tone. If you have family members who were last seen at Ellis Island between the years 1949 and 1954, you may be entitled to compensation. A sentence that treats mass disappearance like a clerical error. From President Grant in the 19th century to the officials escorting migrants in the 1950s, the American government has been a willing accomplice in this system of sacrifice. Everything cloaked in bureaucracy, immigration, and progress. But behind it all, a pact of silence, a betrayal of thousands of lives. What is the true secret behind all of this? Mount Rushmore, located in South Dakota, is one of the most iconic monuments in the United States. Construction began in 1927 and was completed in 1941. The mountain was carved to display the faces of 4 key presidents in American history: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. Each one represents a fundamental pillar of the nation. Washington symbolizes the founding, Jefferson the expansion, Roosevelt the development, and Lincoln the preservation of the Union. More than just a work of art, Mount Rushmore was conceived as a lasting symbol of American greatness, progress, and identity. But as we've already seen with the Statue of Liberty, in this universe, everything is about to take a very dark turn. This third episode opens with a series of threatening messages written directly onto Mount Rushmore on August 7th, 2003. The messages don't just criticize the US government. They accuse national monuments themselves of being the sites of mass, systematic executions. The US government can fund mass murder if it's labeled as a national monument. Every day, executions occur in 2,600 American landmarks. The blood of liberty will be avenged. The souls of Lincoln will be freed. According to the episode description, the individuals responsible for these messages remain unidentified and still at large. A week later, on August 14th, another message is discovered. This time, it's written beneath the face of Thomas Jefferson. I will introduce infection next week, Monday to Sunday, 10:12 to 10:13 p.m. Watch the symptoms. This is no generic warning. It's a precise schedule signaling the arrival of an infection, an anomaly, an outbreak. The phrase, watch the symptoms, implies that the effects of this infection will be visible, measurable, and, most importantly, recordable on video. Something is about to manifest, every night, for exactly 1 minute. In response, the National Park Service assigns a nighttime patrol to monitor Mount Rushmore for 7 consecutive nights, with strict orders to film any and all anomalies between 10:12 and 10:13 p.m. What those recordings capture is truly disturbing. Monday. The camera is aimed at Mount Rushmore, but the angle is off. The shot is unstable, as if the operator is nervous. Suddenly, a bright, unidentified object crosses the sky above the monument. A distant impact sound follows. This marks the arrival of the infection. The object seems to collide with the monument, initiating a transformation that will unfold over the next 6 days. Tuesday. The camera focuses on the space between the heads of Washington and Jefferson. A flickering light slowly begins to pulse, then suddenly speeds up and goes dark. Wednesday. The footage pans slowly across each presidential face, one by one. In the middle of the sequence, a loud, unnatural howl echoes in the background. Thursday. A strange spike appears between Roosevelt and Lincoln. Both faces are now streaked with an unknown brown substance. The infection is beginning to manifest physically. Friday. A second spike appears, once again between Roosevelt and Lincoln, right next to the first one, but this time the brown substance is completely gone. Saturday. There is no image, only ambient sounds, mostly wind, and then a siren begins to wail. Sunday. The sirens continue, but they now sound far more unnerving. The camera finally returns, slowly zooming out to reveal that the faces of Mount Rushmore have nearly vanished. In their place, each head now has multiple spikes emerging from its base, similar to those seen on Friday. The infection appears to be complete. The episode ends with a quiet yet haunting quote, attributed to Hannah McElroy, a local photographer.
Mount Rushmore smells just like baby powder nowadays. I think it comes from the stuff the workers put on the heads. Yeah, I see them do it all the time. They go from Washington to Lincoln every night, powdering it like a baby.
What exactly is Hannah talking about? In the fourth episode of the Monument Mythos, we leave the mainland behind and shift our attention to a small island in the Pacific, Alcatraz. Alcatraz is a rocky islet located in San Francisco Bay, best known for housing one of the most impenetrable prisons in the history of the United States. It operated as a federal penitentiary from 1934 to 1963 and was specifically designed to contain the country's most dangerous and incorrigible criminals. The episode opens with a blurry, distant image of the island, shrouded in thick fog. A caption informs us, "Alcatraz Island, 2 days before therapy." Immediately after, the footage cuts to a detailed map of the island and its facilities, but something feels off. 3 areas on the map are oddly highlighted, as if they weren't just man-made structures, but something organic. They resemble cell nuclei, mitochondria, or membranes. The footage suddenly cuts out. The next segment moves forward one day. Alcatraz Island, 1 day before therapy. The new title is deeply unsettling, Alcatrazosis. We're shown an animation of the main prison building, inside which a bizarre process unfolds, something resembling cellular mitosis. Alcatraz is literally splitting in two, replicating like a cancer cell. This isn't just an island, it's a living organism. A massive, extra-dimensional biological entity disguised as a military prison. Once again, the footage cuts abruptly. We're now brought to the critical moment. Alcatraz Island. Radiation therapy number 1. The island is once more seen from afar, but this time it's bathed in an ominous red glow. The therapy has begun. The government, in a desperate move, decides to bombard the island with radiation, treating it as if it were a malignant tumor. But the next segment reveals the procedure's catastrophic failure. Rather than killing the creature, the radiation accelerates its reproduction, leading to the unstoppable growth of multiple biological landmasses spreading across the ocean in a straight line. An army marching toward the coast. Under the title Projected Movement, we're shown a timeline of the island's shifting location. Starting in 1950, Alcatraz begins to move gradually year by year until in 1975, it starts drifting through San Francisco Bay, inching closer to the mainland. Once it arrives, it stays put for a decade before beginning to consume everything in its path. By the year 2020, reports indicate that the Alcatraz zone has expanded all the way to western Texas. The 2003 Alcatraz attack continues to baffle the scientific community. This time, the Monument Mythos takes a surprising political turn with the introduction of a figure who, in our world, never became president, James Dean. In our timeline, James Dean was an iconic American actor, a symbol of 1950s youth and rebellion, whose meteoric career was tragically cut short. He died in a car crash in 1955, at the age of 24. But what you're about to witness takes place in a parallel universe where none of that ever happened. The episode opens with a broadcast from ABC's nightly news. Anchor Peter Jennings announces a special transmission of national importance scheduled for the following week. For 7 consecutive days, the newscast reminds the public to tune in. Jennings builds suspense with the words, "The most unprecedented announcement in recent history." Finally, the night arrives. Over 60 million Americans are glued to their screens, surrounded by rumors. Some say it could be confirmation of alien life. Others fear it's the start of an all-out nuclear war. Tension builds. The broadcast ends. The screen fades to black. A 10-second countdown begins. Then the title appears, DEANDEMOCRAZY. Panic erupts. People rush into the streets, screaming that the end of the world has begun. But once the countdown ends, everything changes. Dread turns to disbelief, and then to joy. Tears are shed. Cheers erupt. In a matter of seconds, the unthinkable is revealed. James Dean is running for president. The announcement doesn't just surprise the nation, it ignites a mass movement. The video lasts only 15 seconds, but it's enough to capture the public's rage and disillusionment over the Vietnam War. No other candidate had ever managed to express the nation's pain so clearly. The streets explode in spontaneous celebration. The reaction is so overwhelming that ABC cancels the news broadcast the next day. In its place, they air a continuous half-hour loop of Dean's 15-second ad, watched by another 38 million people. Strange, to say the least. I mean, a 15-second clip played on repeat for 30 minutes? That's insane. The Dean fever spreads like wildfire. He becomes a cultural and political phenomenon unlike anything the country has seen. Due to multiple assassination attempts on Robert Kennedy, the Democratic primary debates are canceled in 1968, but this doesn't slow Dean's campaign. In fact, he never needs to appear at rallies or hold public events. His entire strategy revolves around TV ads, written and directed by Dean himself, that air every Friday night on ABC, quickly becoming the most watched program since Star Trek ended. 2 weeks before the election, a debate is scheduled between Dean and Richard Nixon, but Dean doesn't show. Instead, he invites Nixon to race cars on a track. Against all odds, Nixon agrees. They spend the day together, and according to rumors, Nixon eventually says, "To hell with it, I'm voting for you. You're already a better president than I'll ever be." That quote was never confirmed, but it spreads across the nation like wildfire, and it completely tanks Nixon's chances. It's yet another clue screaming at us. This is not our world. Because in our reality, Richard Nixon was an ambitious, hardened, calculating politician who lost to John Kennedy in 1960 but came back to win the presidency in 1968. He was known for his resilience, his distrust of others, and his relentless thirst for power. The idea that this man would spend an entire day racing with his opponent and then publicly admit he's voting for him is absolutely unthinkable in any real political landscape. But not everyone is celebrating. On November 1st, 1968, just 4 days before the election, the Anti-Dean Association takes over radio stations to denounce him. They accuse him of corrupting the youth through television. They sabotage hundreds of power lines across the Southeast to prevent his final ad from airing. And how does Dean respond? He doesn't hide. He flies down personally, despite the threat of an attack, and helps local electricians repair the lines. The youth hail him as a hero. Meanwhile, older conservative viewers, especially the white Southern elders, watch from their windows in suspicion. To them, Dean is something unnatural, too young, too handsome, too fond of jazz. It's during this section, narrated from the perspective of these conservatives, that we're hit with a disturbing visual. A black and white image of Dean, wearing black wings, appears on screen. Alongside it, a chilling phrase, "James Dean is no man," produced by the Anti-Dean Association. This cryptic message may carry more weight than it seems. After all, this is an analog horror series, and perhaps, just perhaps, this isn't merely a parallel universe. Maybe James Dean isn't even human. But the public doesn't care. The campaign doesn't falter. On November 5th, 1968, James Dean wins in a historic landslide, 75% of the popular vote and 395 electoral votes. Nixon calls him the next day to congratulate him. The inauguration takes place on January 20th, 1969, at the official Capitol Raceway. Dean's speech lasts less than a minute. Instead of listing political promises, he hands the microphone to others: civil rights activists, indigenous families, and even Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in his first public appearance since the assassination attempt 9 months earlier. In our history, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on April 4th, 1968, 9 months before James Dean's fictional inauguration. Since then, with every new presidential inauguration, those who oppose the elected leader choose to boycott the official event and celebrate DEANDEMOCRAZY Day instead, watching the wild 1969 inauguration as an act of symbolic protest. Dean appears on live television on April 20th, 1969, to reflect on his first 90 days in office, but just 6 seconds in, the audio cuts out. The Anti-Dean Association claims responsibility for the sabotage, yet the result backfires. The silent footage of Dean, his intense gaze, his quiet confidence, his raw charisma, captivates the nation. He communicates more in those 6 silent seconds than most presidents do in an entire term. Stanley Kubrick would later call it the greatest silent film ever made. And that's how this bizarre episode ends. This 6th episode of the Monument Mythos takes us to a deeply unsettling, yet revealing scenario: the hijacking of Air Force One, the presidential aircraft. But this isn't a terrorist attack. What unfolds is a supernatural intrusion carried out by a mysterious entity the authorities have given a chilling name: the Air Force One Angel. The episode begins with a simple scene, a plane taking off. But context changes everything. We're told that on August 17, 2003, Air Force One lifted off and began following an anomalous flight path, making stops at 3 key locations: Mount Rushmore in South Dakota, San Francisco in California, and Liberty Island in New York, where, notably, the Statue of Liberty has completely vanished. Multiple eyewitnesses report seeing the aircraft dropping what they called packages over several national landmarks. By now, many of you have likely noticed, these locations weren't chosen at random. Each one has already been the site of monstrous, inexplicable, and potentially apocalyptic events we've witnessed in previous episodes. Let's take a moment to recall what happened in RUSHMOREREVENGE. On Monday night, an unidentified flying object struck Mount Rushmore, triggering the monument's horrific transformation. Now, knowing that Air Force One traveled there that very same month, could that UFO have been Air Force One? Was it the Angel who unleashed the infection? Everything seems to suggest so. What's certain is that the Air Force One Angel is deeply connected to the supernatural phenomena affecting America's monuments. When the plane finally landed, the entity was captured on video. The details are hard to make out, but we can glimpse a pale, humanoid figure, its features vaguely human, but distorted. This remains the only known image of the angel, taken moments before the transmission abruptly cuts out. In the official video description, the archivist's note provides further unsettling details. No one knows how the angel even managed to board Air Force One. The aircraft was secured with advanced security locks, featuring irregular edges and intrusion-proof shielding, doors that should have been impossible to breach using conventional tools. Yet investigators found strange warping around the aircraft's plastic door frame. Physical distortions attributed directly to the creature. Something that shouldn't have been able to open those doors somehow did. The note also mentions that most known photographs and video footage of the angel were taken during the plane's mysterious stops. In the final moments, we're told that Air Force One was shot down after attempting to re-enter the restricted airspace over Washington, D.C., but was it truly destroyed? Can an anomaly like this really be erased with missiles or anti-aircraft fire? Or did the angel simply abandon the plane before it was hit? Located in the heart of Washington, D.C., the Lincoln Memorial is one of the most revered and solemn monuments in the United States. Built in 1922 as a tribute to President Abraham Lincoln, its design echoes a Greek temple, radiating solemnity, justice, and quiet reflection. Inside, a colossal statue of Lincoln, seated in a marble chair, watches in silence with a grave, contemplative expression. But in the universe of the Monument Mythos, That unflinching gaze takes on a far more chilling meaning. What once seemed like a symbol of freedom and redemption is, in truth, the setting of a dark, institutionalized practice, carefully hidden beneath layers of official decorum, the Lincoln looking. This episode reveals the disturbing secret behind the monument through 3 testimonies, 3 perspectives that piece together the truth. Behind the cold stone, someone is watching. The first to speak is Maya Arnoldson, an ordinary woman who fell victim to a terrifying case of mistaken identity that temporarily turned her into a Lincoln looker. Maya recounts that it all began the moment she opened her front door, and without warning, she found herself inside a strange suit, strapped to a metallic seat, completely immobilized. She had no memory of how she got there, only that she wore an opaque mask that blocked her vision, except when sunlight hit the material just right, allowing her to glimpse the face inside. A face she didn't recognize, until she later drew it from memory. The isolation wasn't just physical. During the days she was trapped, she was fed through thin tubes inserted into the eye holes of the mask. Weird soup, she says. But the most terrifying part? Maya wasn't supposed to be there. The government had made a mistake, a name mix-up. She wasn't the right Maya Arnoldson. Once they realized the error, she was released, given financial compensation, and received a personal apology from Ronald Reagan. It's worth noting, in this universe, Reagan was never president, but served instead as one of James Dean's vice presidents, reinforcing the show's internal continuity. Maya concludes that the government doesn't bother covering up her story because no one believes her anyway. The concept's just too absurd to take seriously, she says, and yet, it's real. The second testimony comes from Leonard W. Moreland, a former presidential advisor. He confirms what we feared. The Lincoln Looker program is not only real, it's a secret presidential tradition. According to Moreland, every president has the authority to select a person, someone troublesome, a rival, or simply someone they dislike, and condemn them to become a Lincoln Looker. The person vanishes. They spend the rest of the president's term, or terms, entombed inside the statue. The punishment doesn't always target powerful figures. Sometimes it's nothing more than pettiness, a twisted form of presidential justice, a personal vendetta carried out under the veil of institutional silence. Moreland explains it with unsettling calm, as if it were just another part of the democratic process. Rumors that lookers might also be hidden behind presidential portraits once led to a bizarre moment in White House history when several paintings were taken down and inspected to debunk conspiracy theories. But these efforts felt less like transparency and more like misdirection. The episode ends with a phone recording, a voicemail left by Howard Melrose for his wife, Eunice.
Hello, we're not available now. Please leave your name and phone number after the beep. We will return your call.
Hey, Eunice. It's Howard. I don't know what I just saw. I was at the top of the steps, reading the inscriptions and talking to visitors, when I started to hear a faint scratching sound. I didn't think much of it at first, but when I got close to the chair, I realized that the scratching was coming from inside the marble. So I went to a guard and asked whether she could do anything about animals that could be trapped in there. She told me not to worry about it, and that they'd take care of it once there were fewer visitors. A few minutes passed, and the scratching became much louder. I went back to the guard and asked what kind of animals usually got stuck in there, and she said, wild animals. The sound started to make visitors anxious. I remember one boy pulling so hard at his mother's hand, begging to leave. A blind girl with one of those canes went up to the chair and pressed her head against it to listen. Then she started crying. Her parents tried to pull her away, but she just began to hit the chair with her cane. That's when the guards asked everyone to go back down the steps. I don't know why, and it's going to sound crazy, but I felt compelled to help. So I went to the blind girl and joined her in hitting the marble. The guards tried to pin us down, but the scratching became too loud for even them. It sounded like someone was shaving down a chalkboard. Eventually the marble began to crack, and a few more hits caused the crevice to expand all the way to the top of the chair. There was a sudden burst of air from the damage, and the head suddenly turned toward us. I was afraid it would fall, so I picked the girl up and went down a few steps. The head slowly rotated back into place, and when it started to be pushed upwards, I took out my camera. It was no wild animal.
The video ends with footage recorded by Howard just before fleeing the scene. The marble bust slowly turns to the right, and from within, a strange creature begins to emerge. This is, without a doubt, one of the most disturbing episodes of the entire season. And yet, the most terrifying thing isn't the creature, it's the Lincoln looking itself. A practice so normalized, so woven into the system, that it's barely hidden. The government doesn't even deny it, because no one's willing to believe it. And that, in itself, is a form of control. What we're shown is a society that coexists with deeply inhuman practices, all masked beneath layers of patriotism and ceremony. The Lincoln Memorial, a symbol of the end of slavery, is revealed to be a chamber of perpetual torment, a grotesque irony that completely corrupts its original purpose. And finally, let's not forget one of the most chilling messages found in Rushmorerevenge. The souls of Lincoln will be freed. At the time, it seemed like a vague symbolic threat, but now, we understand exactly what it meant. The souls of Lincoln are the LINCOLNLOOKERs, trapped victims, forced to gaze from within the statue, punished, forgotten, turned into silent sentinels, consumed by stone. We're taken to the very heart of the U.S. Capitol, where the towering Washington Monument hides a dark and sinister past. Right from the beginning, the video warns us. The content may be disturbing, and even trigger seizures in viewers with photosensitive epilepsy. It all begins with a poem titled "The Special Tree," the name of the apparently female entity contained within the Washington Monument. The forest fell swiftly as the lumberjack swung, except for the special tree, which could not be stung. She missed her friends and the hymns they sung. So she started a tune that broke the man's lung. Immediately after, the video shifts tone, presenting a visual timeline. Photographs spanning from 1840 to 2003. In 1840, the first known photograph of the special tree is taken. In 1848, construction of the obelisk begins. Between 1860 and 1865, the project is halted due to the Civil War. Most disturbingly, the footage shows prisoners of war being led inside the unfinished structure, a method eerily similar to what we saw in LIBERTYLURKER. By 1888, construction is completed. In 1910, the monument becomes a major tourist attraction. Between 1910 and 1971, 20 people vanish while visiting. They become known as the Washington Absentees. Then, in 1972, the monument's true, horrifying purpose. It's not a monument. It's an execution machine. According to the footage, visitors are taken by elevator to the top of the obelisk. Once there, sonic waves, produced by the entity sealed inside, render them unconscious. The floor then opens beneath them, sending their bodies plummeting into the hollow shaft, where they're crushed at the bottom. All of it orchestrated by the government. In the year 2000, an unknown individual vandalizes the monument with a message nearly identical to the ones seen in Rushmorerevenge. The infection is nigh. The music of Washington will end. At this point, it becomes increasingly clear who's behind these ominous messages. The Angel of Air Force One. It seems this entity is carrying out some kind of personal vendetta. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll dive deeper into that when the time comes. What's important for now is this. The angel is also tied to the events we're about to witness. After all, the timeline matches the August 2003 flight of Air Force One, when it traveled to key national monuments, spreading the infection. August 2003, a camera captures the Washington Monument at night. At first, everything seems calm, until the camera person notices something strange. A branch, A living branch is protruding from one side of the monument, and as if aware that it's being watched, it suddenly retreats back inside. Then, all hell breaks loose. We hear deep groaning and metallic cracking. The entire monument begins to bend, slowly leaning to one side, as though the tree within is taking control, warping the structure from the inside. Suddenly, the screen is flooded with a blinding white light. Bolts of lightning burst from a newly formed arch near the summit. One of them strikes the camera directly. The footage cuts out. But the episode isn't over. The faces of the Washington absentees reappear. 19 of the 20 missing individuals are found unconscious, all except one. However, we're told that the identity of the 20th victim has now been confirmed. We just don't know who it is. Yet. This chapter is presented as a local news report, broadcast by WBOC-TV and published by the Delaware River Journal. What begins as a curious Christmas story quickly unravels into something far more disturbing. The possibility that the real George Washington died during the Revolutionary War, and that a double took his place for the remainder of his presidency. It all starts on December 24th at 4 p.m. Two local fishermen, Ralph Grasserman and Michael Tillen, are out catching catfish on the frozen Delaware River. It's a quiet, ordinary scene until something interrupts their routine. A bicorn hat sticking out of the ice. One of those iconic 18th century hats worn by generals during the American Revolution. Intrigued, they start digging, and what they find beneath the hat changes everything. A human scalp, still attached to a head of hair. Instead of calling the authorities, the two fishermen keep going. They dig for hours, determined to recover the entire body. Finally, at 10 p.m., they manage to free the corpse, or at least what they think is a corpse. Just as they're about to move it, one of the body's eyes twitches. That tiny movement, a simple flicker of the eye, changes everything. The body is alive. Ralph and Michael rush it home. Carefully, they place it in a bathtub filled with warm water, gradually raising the temperature to avoid thermal shock. And it works, at least for a moment. At 2 a.m., the frozen man briefly regains consciousness, and with frost still clogging his lungs, he utters a single, muffled phrase. "Victory or death." A line that any historian would instantly recognize. It was the personal motto George Washington inscribed on his battle standard the night of December 25, 1776, just before crossing the Delaware to launch a surprise attack on the Hessians in Trenton. But after that cry, the man slips back into a coma. At 7 a.m., the paramedics transport the man to Delaware State Hospital. Both fishermen swear the man's face looked eerily familiar. In a moment of near comedy, Michael pulls out a dollar bill and compares it to the man in the tub. That's when the truth hits them. The face is identical to George Washington's. Ralph adds another chilling detail. They had to remove the man's clothes because they were too soaked and heavy to move him, and while the garments were frozen solid, he's certain, beyond any doubt, they were authentic 18th century clothing. It was the real George Washington, a man who, perhaps, never survived the Delaware crossing, and whose death may have been concealed by his own army to prevent the war effort from collapsing. The report suggests that once he died, his body was either hidden or abandoned in the river, eventually becoming entombed in ice, while a carefully selected double took his place as commander-in-chief and later as the first president of the United States. Hence, the title of this episode, Delaware Double. The implications are massive. The entire foundation of American history could have been built on an imposter. But the story doesn't end there. Reporters ask President James Dean, yes, that James Dean, reimagined as the president in this alternate timeline, what he thinks of the story. His response is as brief as it is unsettling. "I'm surprised." Just 2 words, and yet they speak volumes. We know Dean has access to classified information. We know his administration is hiding terrifying secrets about the nation's monuments. So, was his response genuine? The video ends with 2 curious facts. The story aired on December 27, 1976. The next day, the Delaware River Journal shut down permanently, as if someone, lurking in the shadows, had decided that this truth should never spread beyond a single broadcast. And finally, before wrapping up the episode, there's one small but intriguing continuity detail worth highlighting. One of the fishermen is named Michael Tillen, That last name might sound familiar. In the very first episode of the Monument Mythos, the protagonist is a young man named Riley Tillon. Coincidence? I don't think so. These two are clearly connected, one way or another. This episode, the longest and arguably one of the most revealing of the entire first season, is structured around two books: A Recollection of the Tragedy, written by John D. Rockefeller, and Virginia in Wonderland, penned by a young girl named Virginia Fate Arnoldson, a survivor of an event that defied the laws of reality, a dual perspective of the same event. The installation of the special tree at Rockefeller Center during Christmas 1934 and its devastating consequences. The story begins innocently enough. Rockefeller recalls how, during the first winter of the center's construction, workers set up an impromptu tree adorned simply with tin cans, buttons, and cranberries. That small, symbolic gesture moved him deeply. It was an act of hope amidst the chaos. Inspired by that scene, Rockefeller decided to make it an annual tradition. But not just any tree would do. He wanted something that transcended the ordinary, something perfect. According to Virginia, Rockefeller and his men spent 12 days and nights exploring the northern forests, rejecting tree after tree. None were tall enough, beautiful enough, or extraordinary enough, until one night they heard a melody, a subtle, sweet song, as if the wind had fallen in love. Following the sound, they arrived at a tree that was unlike any other, and Rockefeller knew immediately it was the one. However, this tree had something strange about it. No tool could damage it. Neither violent axe blows, nor 100 sticks of dynamite, nor a week of excavation could touch it. The special tree was invulnerable. We already knew this, as it was introduced earlier in the poem at the start of Washington-Wormhole. They had to hire the best excavators, and after years of work, they finally managed to pull it from the earth. For 3 consecutive Christmases, replacement trees were used in the meantime. But in 1934, the special tree was finally set up at Rockefeller Center. Virginia takes us to that cold December day. Rockefeller, proud, gazes at his creation. The tree stands tall, bare, without branches, leaves, or color, an inert figure. New York City Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia complains about its appearance, demanding that artificial branches be added to decorate it. Rockefeller reluctantly agrees, and the installation is completed. Meanwhile, Virginia, thrilled to fulfill her dream of being the first to decorate it, runs with her metal star in her pocket. But the branches are too high for her to reach alone, so she runs to find help. 10 friends, 10 children willing to form a human ladder so Virginia can reach the top. And she does it. She places her star at the peak and proudly declares,
"Hooray! Victory! I'm the first!"
Then, everything collapses. The artificial branches come undone. The tree bends gently, forming a perfect arch, an impossible figure. And right from the center of the arch, lightning erupts. A supernatural roar tears through Rockefeller Plaza. What we're witnessing is exactly the same event we saw earlier in Washington-Wormhole, but this time we'll witness the direct consequences of being near this strange phenomenon. The children try to flee, but there's no escape. A lightning bolt strikes them all, and the world around them begins to dissolve into white light. Virginia opens her eyes, and she's no longer in New York. She's in an endless field of special trees, a place she calls Wonderland, named after the book her mother used to read to her as a child. In this place, there are people, many people, and one of them whispers a chilling phrase in her ear: "The trees are not trees." After another burst of light, Virginia and her friends wake up on the ground in front of Rockefeller Center, dazed, injured, but alive. The special tree has vanished. They are all taken to the hospital, but Virginia's parents don't recognize her. Her clothes, her freckles, her voice, nothing fits. The same happens with her friends. Their surnames don't match. Their faces are unfamiliar. Their memories are distorted. The children themselves feel that even their parents aren't quite right, as if they've crossed into another world. Very similar, yes, but definitely not the same. When Rockefeller visits the hospital, he asks them basic questions about history and about himself. What he hears leaves him paralyzed. The Rockefeller they knew was an oil magnate. They deny his 2 presidential terms. They don't recognize his political legacy, and he understands that they aren't the same. Then came the medical exams, and what they revealed was so unsettling that Rockefeller confessed that had he been able to choose between that and the death of the children in the special tree incident, he would have preferred the latter, because at least death is something he can comprehend. What the x-rays revealed, however, was beyond understanding. The nurses refused to show the images to the children, but Virginia, curious, brave, pressed her ear to the wall during the night, and she heard a phrase repeated softly, almost in terror. Everything's backwards. A complete inversion of bodily symmetry. Hearts on the right side, livers displaced, spinal columns reversed, as if the children's bodies had been reconstructed from an inverted template of themselves. Or worse still, as if they belonged to a universe where all the physical and biological laws are reversed from the one they are currently in. And that's precisely what's happening here. Virginia and her friends swapped universes with their counterparts from another reality. Something similar might have happened with the Washington absentees in Washington Wormhole, but let's not jump ahead. Let's leave it there for now. Meanwhile, over the weeks, remorse grows in Rockefeller. He remembers how, from the very beginning, the tree resisted, how everything in him screamed that it shouldn't be uprooted, but he couldn't stop himself. Was his obstinacy the cause of the tragedy? Or was he chosen by the tree from the very beginning? Rockefeller wonders if we are mere trains on fixed tracks, destined to fulfill an inevitable fate. The final reflection of the episode comes from his son, John D. Rockefeller Jr.
Many, including my father, believe that the 1934 Christmas tree vanished. This is untrue. I have seen it wandering in the plaza on many occasions, and it resembles a man far more than any tree.
The special trees are not trees. They are conscious entities capable of shapeshifting. And as if that weren't enough, thanks to this story, we can also establish a direct connection with the spikes seen atop Mount Rushmore during Rushmorerevenge. They no longer seem like mere bone structures or parasites, but rather the crown of a forest of special trees, don't you think? The episode ends with a recording of Rockefeller Center at night, with someone, or something, watching from the distance, high on the rooftop. This time, we're presented with My Crazy Grand Canyon Adventure, a seemingly innocent video created by Lauren Arnoldson, a young girl documenting a family trip to the Grand Canyon with her father, Nathaniel Arnoldson, and her brother, Quinn Arnoldson. The result is a sort of visual diary, edited using a program called Maze Movie Maker. Yes, you heard that right. Just another subtle clue that we're in an alternate universe. The video opens with shots of the breathtaking Grand Canyon landscape. Lauren and Quinn smile and pose in front of the camera. Everything seems wholesome and mundane, until Lauren claims to have seen something strange. The camera tilts toward the sky. A blurry, distant figure moves among the clouds. We can't quite make it out, but its presence is unmistakable. And it's accompanied by one bizarre detail. The moment it appeared, the air was filled with the smell of vinegar. As the episode progresses, we learn that all of this is connected to the creature spotted by Lauren and her family, the CANYONCROWN, also known as CANYONGOLLON. According to the research Lauren and Quinn conduct afterward, this creature produces vinegar to shrink its own head, allowing it to fit inside its body, a revelation as grotesque as it is unsettling. The footage continues until Lauren encounters the creature once again. After this event, she introduces a segment she calls bonus stuff. But it's in the final moments that the tone takes a sharp turn. Lauren reveals a dark truth. Her father, Nathaniel, brought them to the Grand Canyon with a purpose, to search for his missing sister, Maya. That creature is Maya Arnoldson. We've seen this character before back in the episode LINCOLNLOOKER, but what exactly happened to her? Just know this, the Arnoldsons are characters we'll be seeing again and again. In fact, as many of you may have already noticed, the very same Virginia who lived through the traumatic special tree incident is part of this same family, a family seemingly marked by anomaly, scattered across time and space, entangled in the supernatural events of this distorted universe. The video closes with a black and white montage, image after image of headless people appearing in different areas of the Grand Canyon flash on screen. For now, it's a mystery, but everything will eventually become clear. The final photograph shows two men standing beside a sign that reads, "Head off trail." A disturbingly clever play on words. We've reached the end of the first season, closing with one of the most tragic and disturbing episodes so far. This chapter unfolds across 6 parts, covering over a century of history. Part 1, Sculptor. It all begins with a series of telegrams exchanged between 4 key figures in the Freedom Statue project: architect Thomas U. Walter, Army engineer Montgomery Meigs, sculptor Thomas Crawford, and an inspector named Alfonso Zaffino. In June of 1858, Meigs commissions Crawford to design the statue. He accepts immediately and submits several models. The third design is ultimately selected, though Meigs requests that he change the figure's cap. Crawford agrees and begins work on the final mold. The process is grueling and plagued by delays. We're told that Freedom is difficult to shape. Soon after, Crawford suddenly dies in Italy. Inspector Zaffino relays the news to Washington, informing them that the statue will be shipped aboard a vessel named Monarca. No one suspects that something sinister has already begun to take form. Part 2, Daughter. We then enter the most unsettling section of the episode, the personal journal of Nina Crawford, the sculptor's daughter. Nina describes her father's sketches of Freedom as portraying a majestic woman, resembling her mother but with the bearing of a queen. In her innocent excitement, Nina asks her father to make a statue that looks like her. He smiles and nods. As the days pass, Thomas never leaves his studio. It wouldn't be the first time. He often spends days working without coming home. But this time, something feels different. Her mother is nervous, uneasy. On the night of April 13th, after tucking Nina into bed, Louisa, her mother, heads to the studio with a look of deep concern on her face. She returns 2 nights later, silent. Not a word. She locks herself in her room. The next day, Inspector Zaffino arrives, asking about Thomas. Not long after, more men show up. And that's when Louisa finally breaks her silence, sobbing uncontrollably, shouting through tears that the statue has her husband's eyes. Her words echo like a curse. Terrified, Nina runs from the house without understanding what's happening. On April 18th, she remembers her father saying the statue would be sent to America aboard a ship called Monarca. Guided by that memory, Nina heads to the harbor and finds the ship docked. There are crates stacked near the pier, and inside them, she glimpses pieces of freedom. A terrible feeling takes hold of her. She hides inside an empty crate, hoping the journey will bring her to wherever her father is. All around her, she senses something unnatural, like his spirit lingers within the statue. Days pass. She can't get out. The crates are tied shut. Starving, she begins to hear unsettling sounds. Ropes snapping on their own, and something moving, something heavy dragging itself across the floor. For a moment, the little girl even wonders if maybe it's her father. Eventually, she manages to escape the crate and finds food. But when she finally sees what she thought might be her father, it's not him. She knows it. But the eyes, those are his. From that moment on, Nina lives in constant fear. She hides again in the same crate, terrified not only of being discovered by the sailors, but by the thing with her father's eyes. She notices the ropes keep snapping again and again. The entity is looking for her. Nina writes less and less. She's afraid the sound of her pencil might give her away, so she promises to only write again once they reach land. Her final entry is dated April 29th, and it is absolutely devastating. Freedom has cradled her in its arms. The creature is sprinting through a jungle, slicing down hundreds of trees with its sword. Nina can barely see anything through the darkness, except one thing: her father's eyes, glowing behind metal eyelids. They reach a deep cave. Freedom sets her on the ground, sparks a fire by slamming its arms against stone, and sits beside it, sharpening its blade for hours, but it never looks at the sword. only at her. And if you're wondering, yes, she was eventually torn apart by that weapon. Her skin was stripped and stretched over the body of the statue, becoming part of it. It's beyond macabre when you think about it. Nina had asked her father to make a statue that looked like her, and now her wish has been granted, just not in the way she imagined.
Part 3, Captain.
From a different point of view, we hear the account of the Monarca's captain, who documents the ship's increasingly bizarre and terrifying voyage from Livorno to Gibraltar. From the very beginning, something felt wrong. The crates holding the statue came undone by themselves. Strange holes kept appearing in the cargo hold. Sailors reported seeing a shadowy figure roaming the deck. The captain suspected a stowaway, but things only got worse. Water began flooding the ship. More and more holes appeared each day, forcing the crew to move the statue crates to the upper deck to avoid damage. Finally, on April 29th, they arrived at Gibraltar. The crates were opened, and they were empty. The statue had vanished.
Part 4, Commissioner.
Inspector Henry Morgan of the Gibraltar Police takes over from there. That same day, April 29th, he leads a team of 13 officers into the Rock of Gibraltar. For days, they had been receiving reports of landslides, sudden forest fires, and a terrifying presence lurking in the area. As the team begins their search, they come across a freshly carved path through the brush. The trees have been cut with such precision and force that some stumps are still smoldering, warm to the touch. Fire licks through the undergrowth, as if some massive force had blazed straight through it all without stopping. After hours of hiking, they discover a deep fissure in the rock. Officer Hadley descends with the aid of ropes. Minutes later, he screams, pale with terror. The others follow, and what they find is unlike anything ever recorded in history. There, at the center of the cave, stands a towering female figure with Greco-Egyptian features. Before it are flattened human remains, so crushed they resemble discarded clothing. Off to the side, a hollow sheet of human skin stretches up a quarter of the statue's height, as if it had been absorbed into it. When they examine the statue's sword, the blade's edge matches perfectly with the cuts on the trees from the path. The horror is too much. Several officers vomit and flee the scene. Later, as the statue is being moved, they discover a diary on the cave floor. It's Nina Crawford's. After that, Gibraltar authorities officially concluded all the destruction in the forest had been caused by strong wind gusts. Not exactly convincing. Up to this point, things seem to have settled, but when they try to transport the statue back to the port, she wakes up. Without warning, Freedom comes to life and begins a massacre. There are no visual records of what happened, only the testimony of Inspector Morgan, who retired shortly after, deeply traumatized. Years later, in his writings, he confesses that one image haunted his dreams night after night. Freedom's eyes.
Part 5, Craftsman.
Philip Reed, an African-American slave assigned to work on the Capitol grounds, witnesses the final leg of this horrific journey. When the ship finally reaches the United States, it no longer carries bronze fragments, but a body. A tall, wounded woman clad in a torn tunic, a broken shield, a bronze helmet, and a blood-stained sword. During the chaos at the Gibraltar port, this figure had begun peeling the skin from the bodies around her, wearing it over her own until she resembled a human being. The moment Philip lays eyes on her, all he sees is someone who fought for her freedom and lost. By official order, he is given a gruesome task: strip the skin from the statue's body to recover the plaster mold hidden within. The previous man assigned had refused, but Philip, being a slave, had no choice. We don't know if Freedom screamed during the process. Reed never says. When it's over, the human body is gone, and the statue lies motionless. Only the plaster replica remains, an empty shell. Soon after, it is mounted atop the Capitol dome. Reed gazes at the final result, his eyes filled with sorrow and a strange certainty. He knows Freedom isn't dead, only asleep, and one day, she will wake again.
Part 6, Sculpture.
Time marches on. It's been 113 years since the statue was placed on the Capitol dome. The date is January 6th, 1977. Everything begins with the front page of the New Delaware Journal, a paper that seems to be replacing the now-defunct Delaware River Journal. The headline is alarming. A mob of demonstrators belonging to the Anti-Dean Association has taken the United States Capitol by force. A According to the article, shortly after protesting in front of the White House, hundreds of ADA members stormed the Capitol. Lawmakers attending a joint session of Congress were evacuated to a secure room just moments before the rioters broke in. Throughout the entire occupation, the intruders screamed a single phrase, "Twin Dean is lying," suggesting that the current president might not be who he claims to be. Next to the article is a photograph of the Capitol dome. The Statue of Freedom is still standing at the top, but smoke is rising from its base. The caption beneath the photo says it all. The Statue of Freedom is shot down by ADA gunfire. What follows are 2 real recordings from the day of the assault. Here they are. The first is captured outside by a New Delaware Journal journalist. The camera zooms in on the Capitol dome. Suddenly, a series of explosions, ADA gunfire, rocks the statue's base. Within seconds, the colossal figure of freedom crashes down violently. The camera shakes. Then, a thunderous boom. The statue has slammed headfirst into the very center of the Capitol rotunda. The second recording comes from inside. A visibly shaken ADA member films from one of the rotunda entrances. Through the doorway, freedom is visible. And then, she vanishes. A woman's scream tears through the space, abruptly cut off by a heavy, brutal blow. Freedom has claimed another life. What follows is even more horrifying. Wet, organic sounds. Flesh stretching, tearing, shifting. Freedom is likely taking her skin. And with that, the first season of the Monument Mythos comes to an end. So, what did you think? Throughout these episodes, we've seen how the official history of the United States gets distorted, rewritten, and filled with unspeakable horrors. But this is only the beginning. For every answer we get, we're left with twice as many questions. Questions that will slowly unfold as this story keeps expanding further and further. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I love reading them. If you want more videos like this, don't forget to support this one as much as possible and share it with as many people as you can. Also, make sure to follow me on my other social media platforms where I post exclusive content you won't find here on YouTube. And most importantly, a massive shout out to the channel members. Seriously, thank you all so much. If you'd like to become a member, just click the join button next to the subscribe button to unlock tons of perks and exclusive emojis while supporting me. If you're interested, join in. I'll be forever grateful. And last but definitely not least, a very special thank you to It the Fool for your donation. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And remember, this video was made by a cat, and cats can't talk. Thanks for watching. Take care and see you soon.